If there's a certain sound that I can't take out myself, then I'll use Adobe Podcast AI, or hashtags that start conversations have been really, really useful. Like my chart is just gone nuts. You can literally talk to ChatGPT and say, hey, look, I just created this episode. Can you help me summarize it in 3 sentences? Normally, if it's multiple speakers, I'll select speaker labels and the transcript, and I'll stop there. But I have been experimenting a little bit with sentiment analysis.
Creator Magic Podcast.
Just before we get into the episode, would you do me a huge favor and hit the subscribe button? Wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, subscribing really helps the show to grow. And now, let's get into the episode.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm excited to be here.
It's so cool to have you here. So tell me about podcasting, because you're obsessed in growing it.
Oh my gosh. Well, I use it primarily for podcast messaging because podcasters, content creators, we like to talk, but we don't necessarily like to write. So I find that ChatGPT and similar, LLMs, devices and tools and things, that they can really help us talk through our tasks and get the messaging out there. Because oftentimes we'll skip over doing things in a way that would attract people that like to read versus listen or watch, which is, it is what it is. They are who they are. Right. So I find I use ChatGPT for a lot of those purposes, and specifically the voice function on ChatGPT mobile.
So tell me a little bit about how that could work for someone who is an audio first person who wants to talk to AI rather than type into ChatGPT.
Yeah, for example, when you're done with an episode, and you can either take the transcripts and put it in there and then start like text, using the keyboard and going back and forth prompt chaining to get a summary for your show notes, or you can literally talk to ChatGPT and say, hey, look, I just created this episode about this, and this. Can you help me summarize it in 3 sentences? And you can go back and forth in voice with ChatGPT to come to something that sounds like what you would say if you were a good summarizer, which I am not, which is the main thing that I use it for. And you can even give it questions to ask you. Like last week, I did something where I was like, I need you to ask me these 5 questions. And at the end of one, ask me if I'm ready for the next one. That way I can prompt chain one part of it and then move on to the next part and then the next part. And by the end, because it's always producing the text in the background, you can just copy and paste stuff over and massage it more if you need to.
This is incredible. And obviously there are other tools out there that I know you're using. For instance, Claude, which I don't think has a voice chat opportunity at the moment. But how are you using Claude, and how do you find it differs to ChatGPT?
I've used Claude, and I've tried to use Poe, which apparently uses a bunch of different ones all at the same time. I've tried to use them, but I don't find them as organic to use, as easy to use. And like Claude, I've used it for the same purposes that I use ChatGPT, a lot of the messaging stuff to massage it. But it is, like you said, mostly text. Or all text. So it's not as exciting. I don't have as many options. The text that comes out is less formal. It is more conversational. I do have to do less massaging of the tone afterwards, but I also find that it's not as, it just doesn't feel as user-friendly as ChatGPT does. So I mostly use other ones when ChatGPT is hiccuping too much, hallucinating too much, or just tells me I reached my rate limit, which is annoying.
So we've spoken about using it in voice mode and also for post-production of podcast episodes. For instance, brainstorming what we've just spoken about and how to promote it. But are you using AI before you hit record or before you work with someone who's about to record an episode? And are there any techniques or ideas for using AI before you even hit the record button?
You can definitely brainstorm ideas for your podcast episodes. I just did an entire episode on scripting a podcast. I don't personally script my podcast. I have a burning idea and I just talk and then I edit because I do all the things. So I know I'm going to fix it later. But I do have clients that use scripts. And so I was helping them speed up their workflow or make it just a little bit easier by using ChatGPT for that. And you can definitely use LLMs for helping you script your podcast. The one caution I have is that you can get a shareable link within ChatGPT within the free versions 3.5 and 4.0. But I learned this, unfortunately, last week, that the actual chat does not last as long as we think it does, even if it shows up in the menu. I lost an entire course that I was planning. I have backups, but it was gone from the chat within less than 2 weeks. So you do need to transfer. If you're saving a link to grab the copy later, then do it much sooner than later, like a couple of days versus a couple of weeks, because it might not be there.
So on that topic, Steph, what are you using for your backups, for your note-taking outside of AI tools? Like, are you using something like Notion or Google Sheets? What do you do to organize all the things?
I primarily work within Google Drive. I've tried a million different apps and things and all the fancy words that used to describe what they do, and it just don't work for me. I needed one central place that was super easy to navigate that most of my clients would feel comfortable with. So I mostly use like Google Docs, Google Sheets. I make folders. I save some of my audio even there. I see that now you can access your Google Drive from within ChatGPT. And I've actually used attachments instead of doing like one or two when uploading transcripts, instead of doing one or two prompts with chats and then asking it to do a summary from those, you can actually upload an attachment of your transcripts now. So there's new things that are happening.
It's incredible. And I've not used it myself, but I can imagine how powerful that is. Any other tools that we should dive into that are interesting as they pertain to content creation or specifically podcasters, as you work with so many, right?
Yeah, most of mine do come in post. That's interesting. But afterwards, if there's a certain sound that I can't take out myself, then I'll use Adobe Podcast AI or Auphonic, depending on which one, because Adobe Podcast AI, as amazing as it is, it frustrates me because it does not do reverb very well. And that's frustrating. But Auphonic does. But also I have a plugin that I use Hindenburg DAW. And so I use Acon Digital Deverberate. I can say that again. Acon Digital Deverberate. And that does amazing with echo/reverb, whatever you want to call it. So I use that a lot. I also use Assembly AI for my transcripts. And we went over ChatGPT and TubeBuddy for YouTube. Mostly I use that for the hashtags and thumbnail and something else. It's all automated and it just kind of walks you through different optimization things. So I just kind of follow it and then forget.
Interesting. Okay, I definitely want to dial in on some of the tools you've mentioned there. Assembly AI. Now, I'm not sure that everyone listening to this show or watching this show will know what Assembly AI is. I'm curious as to how you found that, why are you using it, and why you're not using something like OpenAI Whisper to transcribe, or even just a generic online service, or even something like Descript. Why Assembly AI specifically?
Okay, you just listed off some stuff I haven't tried yet. So now I'm like, I've gotten distracted going, I have to look at those later. Honestly, it's from having conversations with people and as you do, people share links. Hey, I've been using this and it's working really well. And another content creator that I follow, Pilar Ortiz, she sent me that link to the transcripts she sent me a link to Assembly AI's transcript tool and said it worked really well, and I've been using it ever since. I don't even know what else they do, to be quite honest with you. I just know that those transcripts have been better, especially with multiple speakers, than any other one that I've used.
And then what kind of stuff is it doing? Is it giving you just a bulk load of text? Does it break speakers into individual speakers? What kind of stuff does it do?
I can select, there's I think almost 10 different features you can select. Normally, if it's multiple speakers, I'll select the speaker labels and the transcript, and I'll stop there. But I have been experimenting a little bit with sentiment analysis and summaries, and I think they call quotes or key moments or something like that. I don't remember the exact phrasing that they do for that. So I've been playing with those. The summaries I'm not too thrilled with. They are the most clinical, boring, not like, it's more like points than a summation that makes sense together. So I don't really like that, but the speaker labels tend to work really well. And the transcription, like I said, works really well. The sentiment analysis is just fun. It's nice to see if a conversation, is leaning more towards the positive side versus just complaining about everything.
This is absolutely blowing my mind. So yeah, you've reeled off a whole ton of features in Assembly AI that I just don't see in something like OpenAI's Whisper or Descript, or even in, I use Premiere Pro to edit my videos. The moment you throw a video in, it'll transcribe it for you automatically, actually locally on your device as well, which is, I think, a fantastic feature. But then you're listing the ability to, get those separated speakers. I know something like Premiere Pro does that already, but the sentiment analysis, wow, that is incredible. I wonder if you could somehow attach that back to the podcast and maybe have a happy or frowning face on the screen as the person's talking. I mean, I don't know. What kind of feedback is it giving you when you get that sentiment analysis? Is it overall or is it timestamp sentiment?
I want to say it's more of a summary of like almost a percentage of this much positive, this much negative kind of thing. But I have only used it a few times and it was fun, but it wasn't really, I didn't really find a way to use the information. It was just kind of nice to know that it went really well.
That's so cool. So like if a podcast comes out as like only 40% positive, you might go back to the guest and say, we need to re-record this. Unless you're trying deliberately to be controversial, right?
I'm happy to say that's never happened, but I imagine it might be. Yeah. Well, you know how sometimes after a recording, you'd think it might have gone well, but it was a little bit stiffer than you imagined. And it's nice to have that reassurance that in words, in tokens, in words, it was positive. Like that's just kind of a nice little thing to know.
Absolutely. So yeah, a lot of good stuff here. Tell me about TubeBuddy.
It's basically like an overlay. Like when you sign up for it, it is a subscription service. You go into the back end of your YouTube channel, and when you upload a new video, it basically like you follow it around the screen. It says, do this, do that, pick this, choose this. Here are some options here. And it helps you optimize so many different parts of your video that most people forget to do anything of. And yeah, the hashtag part is my favorite because you'll type in one word and it will give you the list and it will show you like scores for the most powerful hashtags.
Okay, so finally, we've gone through a lot of really cool stuff, particularly for podcasters and video creators as well, who can use different tools. The transcript stuff, I think, is incredible. And for somebody who started listening to the show thinking transcribing and using AI was just about getting the words that were said and then putting it into ChatGPT and saying, summarize this, go and see Assembly AI. Steph is saying, go and check out Assembly AI. But finally, to round up, really, social media, obviously it's still important as a part of that post process of promoting everything we do. Any tips for using AI with your social media?
For hashtags, it's been incredibly useful. I primarily am on LinkedIn, and getting hashtags that start conversations have been really, really useful. Like my chart is just gone nuts. It's fantastic. However, for social media posts, huge red flag, because most people, it pulls from the collective us, and we're flawed and we're not very good at social media in general. So when you ask somebody to create something similar to what other people are doing, when it's all kind of not great, is not great. So what you can do is you can feed it your own content, like your transcripts and stuff. You can have it come up with ideas, but I would honestly write the post yourself and then use it for the hashtags.
Makes sense. So use your own brain, but the hashtags, to get you more exposure. I really like that tip. Okay, so to round off, I would recommend everyone goes and listen to your show, AI and Podcasting. It's really good. And your company is called Coffee Like Media. And for anyone who wants to find out more about you or maybe work with you to dial in their AI strategy for podcasting, where would you send them?
Well, they're listening to this, so I think the best place is aiandpodcasting.substack.com. They can leap from there to the podcast, the YouTube channel, my website with my services, all other places. So that's a good central place to start.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of the Creator Magic Podcast. Would you like to get a weekly email with all the latest AI tools I find? If so, head over to mrc.fm/Creator Magic and hit subscribe to get my weekly email newsletter. That's mrc.fm/Creator Magic.